What's good, everybody? It's your brother Mad Black, the most dangerous and the most toxic black man on the internet, and I'm black up in your face again with some more pro black commentary. So, if you are a fan of a lot of these manosphere gurus, you might not like this video, and if you're a fan of these jackasses and F boys like Fresh and Fit, Sneeko, or Andrew Tate, you're definitely not going to like this video. Okay? But there's something that came up on a video that I did about a divester. So I was talking about divestors in that video, and usually when I make a video about divestors, I get a comment from a female that is extremely ignorant and buffoonish. And basically, they're just trying to deflect from the nonsense that goes on with divestors. But this time, actually, I got a weird comment from a male on one of those videos. And the basics of this comment that this male gave was, I made a comment about how white boys never lie. And I was basically just saying, being sarcastic, saying, the white man never lies. So, of course, he must be perfect. And this male came to my channel and was actually upset that I would even say something like that. He made it seem as if, I'm not supposed to be talking about what men do or what men say or whatever, or how I might be coming off as effeminate for even talking about another male in that way or criticizing another male. Now, he could have been joking. He could have been being sarcastic himself. That's possible. But I have run into that same type of mentality amongst the manosphere and those who claim to be, red pill or passport bros or whatever. I've run into this several times where I'll have one of these guys come to me and make it seem as if you criticize or say something about other men and you're a man yourself, then you're in the wrong. You're not allowed to say anything about men in the negative. You're not allowed to chastise them. You're not allowed to criticize them. You just have to sit there and shut up and let men do whatever they want. Even if it's something negative or something stupid, you're not supposed to say anything or make any type of critical analysis. You just have to sit back and watch them do this. And I've seen this so much in the manosphere, in their mentality and in their comment sections everywhere. Okay, so don't come here denying this, because I've seen it several times. And even if you've not said it yourself, you've sat by and allowed other folks to do the same thing within your circle. Okay, so when I see stuff like this, it shows me probably what is one of the biggest problems within the manosphere, and it also showcases to me the difference between what these males think manhood is and what manhood truly is. When I see that type of wayward thinking and that type of cult mentality where you're not even supposed to criticize the people that are at your head or just other people within your group, that shows me how you guys are headed for not only destruction but complete damnation in your movement. So let me preface this by saying this. Okay, I truly do understand that there are males out there who get out there and pander to females by tearing down other men. I understand that. I understand there's people out there like Dr. Umar Johnson and some of these other simps like Mark Lemoyce Hill who get out there and they basically just pander to females, especially black females. And I know a lot of those guys, they're just pandering because they want to get in the woman's drawers, but they're also trying to gain, financial status for themselves. Preachers do it. People like Derek Jackson does it. And to me, that's sickening. To me, that's BS from men on the opposite end of the spectrum. Okay? I don't believe in pandering. and kissing ass, but I also don't believe in just outwardly being a complete jackass and an asshole and excusing everything that men do. And this is the biggest problem that I do have with both the manosphere and especially a lot of the females that co-sign a lot of the stuff that goes on in the manosphere. That they a lot of times that they play past a lot of the bullshit that they obviously see within the manosphere just in order to get your dollars and your support. Crimson Cure is one of the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, but there's other ones out there. There's a lot of other ones out there that do that. And I'm not going to go as far as to call them mammies, because I do think that some of them anyway, I think that they legitimately do agree with what the men are trying to say, and they see the BS going on within the female community. But when you play past a lot of the trash and the nonsense and the disingenuous and the dishonesty that comes from the male side, I think you do them a disservice. I understand we live in the age of the internet where it's got to be all or nothing, and you have to be as hyperbolic as possible and go along to get along. If you want support, if you want super chats, if you want Patreon subscribers and everything else and memberships on YouTube, you have to go over the top. I understand that, but at the end of the day, if your goal is truly to help black relationships, if you do that, you're doing more harm than good. So, that being said, let me move on to what I want to say about these types of males. All right? It's some of you might not know this or understand this. Maybe you grew up without a father or without a grandfather. I grew up with both in my life. I also had a stepfather. And these were men of character that I was able to look up to. Okay? I also had men like my martial arts instructors, some of my coaches, and even my older brothers in their own way. Not, they were some knuckleheads, but they still had some code of ethics, even with whatever their street activities were. Okay, so seeing that growing up in my life, it was easier for me to understand what it means to be a man and what a man is supposed to do, especially when a man is faced with falsehoods or ill logic. A man is always supposed to stand up against things like that. If a man sees another man lying, if a man sees another man giving out falsehoods, if a man sees another man doing just something wrong, you're supposed to stand up for that. This is how men build societies. This is how a man is able to create things like laws. This is how a man is able to maintain order within their society when they stand up against things that are wrong. Otherwise, you will have absolute chaos, and you'll have grifters and people just coming through to plunder and take advantage of your society when you don't stand up. Now, just saying that right then and there, you could understand maybe possibly why we have a lot of chaos within the black community, because there are men that don't stand up against a lot of the nonsense that's out there. Now, I understand it's hard, and for black men in particular, our voices do get drowned out a lot by a lot of the nonsense that's out there that comes from not only females, but a lot of these buck dancing, pandering males that are out there. I understand that. We literally have an entire government apparatus that tries to shut us out. I understand that. But let's look at this from not just a racial perspective. Let's look at this from a man slash female perspective. As a man, you are always supposed to stand up against falsehood. This is in every holy book you can look in. Whether you want to look at the Bible, the Quran, or even like the teachings of Buddha or whatever. A man is always supposed to stand up against falsehood. If you just even want to look at the very basics of God standing up against the devil. All right? If you want to look at good versus evil. A man is always supposed to stand up against that. That's what all those tales and myths and religions were about. It's always the righteous man standing up against evil. So if there is a man out there, another male, giving out falsehoods and BSing and bullshitting, you're always supposed to stand up against that. This is why, like, this type of mentality is what I got from especially my grandfather. My grandfather was always one of those very stern and stoic type of males. I've told you about him before. He is a child that was born during World War II. As a teenager, he served in Korea, and as a young man, he served in Vietnam. Okay, so this is a war veteran. So he's born in the Depression. He comes from that era. So when you come from a man that comes from that type of era and growing up on like a hardcore, like hard-working farm in the South during Jim Crow, not only was he able to teach me what real racism was, but he was also able to teach me what a man should be and what a man should stand for. My grandfather didn't go for a lot of nonsense. Okay? That's not to say that he couldn't have fun or be happy or joke around with us. Like, he was one of the funniest guys I ever knew. But when it came to two men being serious about something, he didn't like BS. And he didn't even like those types of people around him. Because there, some weird guys or people that you didn't trust around town, he would let you know in a minute that he wasn't messing with you. Okay? And if you do come around here, there's going to be trouble. So just from that mentality, from him, I learned that. My father, on the other side of things, was someone who worked in the music industry, and he taught me about, as far as like doing business with people, you want to keep an eye out for certain folks that, whether they're honest or not, whether they're deceitful or not, whether they're on the up and up or not. You had to know these things when, especially dealing in the music industry, or later on when he worked in, contracting and stuff like that. You had to make sure people were on the up and up. Likewise, my brothers, even with some of their knucklehead activities, you still had to be somewhat of a stand-up guy in that lifestyle, or else you would wind up having someone literally stab you in the back or go upside your head or something like that. Okay? So honesty and loyalty do mean things to men. This is why when I automatically see a lot of these bullshitters on the manosphere side of things, like, I'm automatically repulsed by them. And it used to make me angry, it used to infuriate me, but now it kind of makes me look at certain people in a certain way when I see, people having all their faith in some of these bullshit artists. Like, if I see them doing something that's untowards or unmanlike and you're following them, now I'm looking at you kind of sideways too. Okay? If they're doing something that is just so overboard, or it's obviously that they're scamming and you follow them, I think something's wrong with you as well. And I've been trying not to do that, because I understand everyone within their growth, or everyone did not have the upbringing that I had, and everyone did not, maybe they haven't grown the same way. They haven't seen or experienced the same thing. So I'm trying to be a little bit more, not so much lenient, but a little bit more understanding. But at some point, you got to get it, right? At some point, you're going to have to get the point, or else you're going to keep getting caught up in nonsense. And if you keep getting caught up in nonsense, I can't be around you, because I don't want to be caught up in some nonsense. You see what I'm saying? So, like, when I see some of these assholes running around on social media, like Charleston White or Andrew Tate, and all this shit comes out about them over again, over again, over again, and you keep fucking with them, I have to start questioning you, right? If you keep saying all this nonsense, well, like, oh, well, they got some good points, or they do say some good things, and when you start doing that shit like that and making excuses for people like that, for Andrew Tate, Just Pearly Things, Fresh and Fit. Now, there are people out there making excuses for Fresh and Fit and feeling bad for them that they got demonetized. Like, really? You feel bad for these two F-boys that they got demonetized, and you claim that they're helping men? How? How are they helping men? How are they helping you? I know good and damn well they're not. All they're doing is, once again, they just yell at dumb, slutty females on their show. I guess the only thing they're really helping you do is being able to locate their OnlyFans, right? You're able to locate the Instagram and the OnlyFans of these hoes that you claim to not like but truly obsess over. So I guess Fresh and Fit are helping you in that way. But other than that, I can't see how they're helping you, all right? Other than helping you to just feeding into your mentality of complaining about women all the time, so, and giving you a representative of what it is to be a F boy, because they're definitely not representatives of what it means to be a man. Like, I'm still trying to be careful in what I say about this, because I understand YouTube is very strict on some of their rules and whatnot about what you say about certain people. But once again, if Fresh and Fit came around some of the men that I just named and the ones that I grew up with and the ones that showed me the examples of how to be a man, they wouldn't last long. Not at all. That's not a cue of how manhood is. As a matter of fact, if I was like a fan of Fresh and Fit and I brought them around the men in my family or some of my mentors or whatever, they would start looking at me crazy. Like, what are you doing hanging around these two F boys? They would use some other words, but I can't use those words here on YouTube. Okay. And some of you probably know what I'm talking about. But, that's considered toxic and homophobic or whatever if I start using that type of language here. But that's how the men I knew in my life would talk to me. And that, now someone would say that's harsh or it's toxic or whatever, but this is how men protect themselves. This is how men watch out for nonsense. Okay, this is something that goes deep into the man's DNA as far as being protective of their community and their tribe. Okay, this is something that we had in us even all the way back into the days of just living within nature. A man had to understand what it meant to recognize falsehood in somebody else or recognize that someone was lying or grifting in order to avoid tragedy. Because if you're following somebody that's bullshitting you, that can lead you to the road to damnation. That can lead you to extinction. And there are many tribes out there and many types of different people out there that followed somebody that was false or followed somebody who was a liar, and they're not in existence anymore. They've completely been wiped off the face of the earth. That other people have had to learn from that and realize that these are not the types of people you should be following. So, if anything, a man should always call out and talk about the nonsense that goes on out there. When you don't, this is what allows for the buildup, and this is what allows for the proliferation of F boys and these fake ass gurus in that movement. This is why the manosphere movement is such bullshit. This is why you'll have some of these manosphere gurus, they'll be friends one minute and attacking each other the next. They'll be cool one minute and then beefing the next. Because they're bullshitters. And they don't, one will ruin the other one's grift if they get too close together sometimes, right? So unless they, have a handshake at the beginning or at the end to let each other know that they're going to be conning you together, sometimes they wind up bumping heads. But this is why there's so much bullshit artists within the manosphere movement, is because you don't want to call this stuff out. I understand that you feel affected and your self-esteem has been ruined by this society and the way, the gynocracy is and feminism and everything else has kind of trashed men over the years. But that still does not mean that every man is on the up and up. That still does not mean that every male is someone you should trust in. Okay? That still does not mean every male is someone you should listen to. Okay? Just because one side is really effed up does not mean you should just take on anyone from the other side. That's a big problem when people have that. That means you don't have any type of discernment and you don't have any type of common sense to sit and listen to what this other person is saying that's trying to convince you to just go along with them. Okay, you have to be careful of that. As a matter of fact, for you manosphere folks out there, if you're doing that, if you're not criticizing another man or just trying to keep your mouth shut and just get along to go along with these manosphere gurus and these knuckleheads and these con artists, you are no different than the females you criticize. You have become no different than the sisterhood that you always complain about, where you have these females who don't call out other females when they're doing wrong. You'll have these women out here doing ridiculous stuff and being talked into doing dumb things that are detrimental to not just them, but to the community itself. We all saw what happened with Keke Palmer. She basically let a bunch of uh, ratchets and hoes on social media talk her into being a single mama, right? And dumping and ditching her boyfriend or whatever. Now, I'm sure years later she's going to be complaining about he ain't this, he ain't that, but not recognizing her own, how she participated in driving him away and pretty much pushing this child's father out of his life. Okay? So we can't, if men are going to be better than the females, if men are going to have some sort of standard to stand on when we judge some of these females, we have to be better than that. We can't start doing the same dumb things. We can't talk about, I'm holding these females accountable, and then we don't hold the men accountable who are still spouting bullshit, okay? Or who still are taking advantage of other folks, or taking advantage of us, or taking advantage of our finances, or what have you, okay? What is the good of Andrew Tate teaching you how to gain finances if all he's doing is grifting from you later on with some of his scams that he has going, right? What good is him, teaching you how to get women if all he does is out there pimping women, acting like a big ass human trafficker? So you have to be careful with the nonsense that you get from a lot of these folks out here. So once again, as a man, it is your duty to stand up and push back against things that are wrong. If you see something is wrong or you see something is evil, it is your duty as a man to stand up. All right? And I mean that. I even mean that when it comes to me. If there's something that I'm doing that I don't, acknowledge that is wrong, but it is wrong, then people have to stand up to me too, right? I'm not perfect. I'm not the end all be all. I'm not all knowing, but as a man, we all have flaws, and all men have, issues where we might make mistakes, and that's fine to call them out. And as a man, you got to be able to sit there and be able to take that criticism and try to do your best to improve on that. So, even in my own case, I have no problem with someone, making a legitimate criticism of something I've said or done. Because if I'm doing something backwards or doing something that's wrong, it needs to be called out. And that way, I can make the adjustment later on to do better the next time, right? I don't have a problem with that. Like I said, if it's legitimate. Now, this is going to be the last part of this. I don't think I'll be, say, I know I kind of went on a little bit of a rant here. I appreciate you all sitting here and listening and taking this in. And I do want men to think about this, especially young men. Don't be misled by a lot of these gurus out here. Make sure you do some thinking for yourself. And if you feel or see something that's off or something that you should question, go ahead and question it. There's nothing wrong with questioning. And if your guru has a problem with being questioned or he can't answer certain questions, then maybe he's not someone you should be following. Anyway, folks, this is Mad Black, and I will be back with my foot on the devil's back.